Elon Musk brings his 5-year-old son to the White House. No one is ready for what unfolds next. Not the staff, not the guests, not even the president himself. What a 5-year-old said inside the White House made Donald Trump go silent. Don't miss this, and if stories like this move you, hit subscribe now. The Roosevelt room shimmered with the quiet amber glow of late afternoon. Dark, polished wood stretched along the walls, broken only by solemn oil portraits and the slow, deliberate tick of a brass clock perched above the mantel. Around the long, gleaming table sat a collection of minds that shaped the country's future: tech pioneers, business giants, cabinet leaders. And at the head, surrounded by silent aides, sat Donald J. Trump, president once again. It wasn't a press event. There were no cameras, no scripts, only a closed-door conversation on the trajectory of American innovation and power, the kind of talk that happens when no one's pretending. Near the far end of the table sat Elon Musk, unmistakable in his sharp dark blazer, shirt collar undone. But it wasn't Elon who drew the curious glances. It was the child beside him. A boy, 5 years old. His son, XAEA, 12, known simply as X. He sat upright, silent, his small feet just brushing the edge of the chair, not quite touching the ground. A crisp white shirt, tiny black sneakers, and an expression oddly calm, strikingly composed for a child so young. His hands folded neatly in his lap, his gaze unwavering, watching, listening, not fidgeting, not whining, just present. Trump had noticed him early, looked twice in fact, not with annoyance, but curiosity. There was something about the boy's presence, something oddly familiar. Maybe it reminded him of someone. Maybe it reminded him of himself. The meeting moved along. AI regulation, Mars colonization, grid resilience. Voices rose, ideas clashed, but never with chaos. It was sharp, controlled, real. Then came the wind down. Trump leaned back, his chair creaking softly beneath him. He looked over the room. "Anything else?" he asked. "One last thought before we call it." Papers shuffled, throats cleared, and then a small hand rose. Everyone turned. Even Elon blinked. X had raised his hand. Trump tilted his head, half grinning. "Well now, we've got something," he said. Elon gave a slight nod. Part surprise, part amusement. "Go on," Trump said gently, motioning toward the boy. X stood slowly. He looked down the table, his gaze sweeping across rows of adults who built rockets, companies, and governments. And then, without hesitation, he said it. "I want to be president one day." Silence. A few soft chuckles broke out from the back of the room. One executive leaned to another and whispered, "Start him young." But Trump didn't laugh. He leaned forward, locked eyes with the child, and suddenly, it felt like the rest of the room vanished. "You do?" he asked softly. X nodded once. "What?" There was a pause, a breath, and then the boy spoke, quiet but clear. "Because I want to help people who feel like they don't belong." The room froze, a silence so thick it felt like it pressed against the windows. Even the aides had stopped moving. Trump leaned back slowly. "That's a good answer," he said, after a long moment. Still, X didn't smile. He waited. Trump looked across the room, then back at the boy. "Come here." Elon looked uncertain, but he didn't speak. X stepped forward, careful, measured steps, until he stood beside the president's chair. Trump turned slightly, lowered his voice, just enough that the room still heard him. "So you want to be president," he said. "Let me tell you something about that." He raised a hand and pointed toward the tall window, where the sky had begun to slip into a soft orange dusk. "Out there, people think it's about being the loudest, the biggest, the smartest, the strongest. But in here," he tapped his chest, "it's about what you carry when no one claps." X's brow furrowed slightly. He listened. Trump went on. "I stood on stages and made crowds roar. I built towers that touched the sky. I made deals people said were impossible. But none of that, none of it, prepared me for walking into a room, seeing someone who's scared, who's hurting, and having to choose. Do I help, or do I protect myself?" He looked directly into the boy's eyes. "Do you know what the hardest part of being president is?" X shook his head. It's not the enemies, he said softly. Not the cameras. He paused, his voice almost a whisper. It's the silence. The feeling when someone looks at you needing something, and you don't know if you're strong enough to give it. The room didn't move. No coughs. No rustling. Just stillness. Trump leaned in slightly, his tone lower now, measured. People will tell you it's about power, about control, but it's not. It's about responsibility. And when you carry that, he looked down at the table. It gets heavy. X lowered his eyes to the floor. Trump gently reached out, placing 2 fingers under the boy's chin, lifting it just enough for their eyes to meet. But if you remember why you wanted it, if you hold on to the people who feel like they don't belong, then yes, it could be worth it. X blinked slowly. Do you think I could do it? He asked. Trump didn't smile. He didn't speak right away. He just gave a quiet nod. If you stay small in the ways that matter. Yes. A ripple of something passed through the room. Not a sound, not a breath, just a shared knowing. Like truth had brushed past everyone, and no one wanted to break its path. Elon stood now. He stepped forward slowly and reached for his son's hand. Thank you, he said quietly to Trump. Sincerely, without fanfare. Trump rose as well, taller now, older somehow. He looked down at the boy one last time. You've already got something most people never find, he said. X tilted his head. A reason. Trump gave the faintest smile. Exactly. People trickled out of the room after that. Some quickly, some reluctantly, but not one of them left untouched. Because sometimes, in a room full of influence and strategy, a child raises his hand and reminds everyone what power is supposed to be for. And by the time the last guest had gone and the door clicked shut, only 3 remained in the Roosevelt room. Trump, Elon, and the boy who shifted the air. At first, none of them spoke. Not because they didn't know what to say, but because they did, and they knew silence was more sacred now than sound. X stood beside a chair, hands clasped neatly, no fidgeting, no questions. Just looking from one man to the other. Waiting. Trump finally inhaled, slow and full, then returned to his seat at the long table. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Sit with me, he said to X. Elon remained a few feet behind, still standing. A quiet guardian. Trump turned to the boy. You meant what you said? X nodded. What? Trump asked. X looked up. Because it matters. Trump sat back. Thoughtful. Most grown men couldn't answer that. Not really. Matters, Trump repeated. You're sure? X tilted his head, thinking, then said, simply, I think it means when you fix something instead of leaving it broken. Trump blinked, slowly. Across the room, Elon didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. Trump reached for a glass of water, took a sip, set it back down with care. That's a good definition. Another pause. Not awkward, full. The kind of silence that holds space. Then Trump turned to Elon. You ever wonder what kind of world he's going to inherit? Elon answered without looking away from his son. All the time. Trump nodded, slow and tired. I used to think we had to change the world by force. Win, beat, dominate, make it listen. He turned back to the boy. But maybe the world doesn't need to be conquered. Maybe it just needs to be remembered. X looked puzzled. Remembered how? Trump tapped the table softly, almost reverently. By remembering who's not in the room. The boy took that in, really thought about it. And then, with a voice so soft it nearly disappeared, he said, My mom says it's important to notice who isn't being noticed. Trump's mouth pulled into a small, genuine smile. She sounds like someone worth listening to. Elon blinked, once slowly. She is, he said. They talked like that for nearly 30 minutes. No politics, no agendas, no speeches, just real thoughts. Unfiltered, quiet, human. At one point, Trump asked X, what do you like most about people? The boy sat still for a long time before answering. When they do something that's not for them. Trump nodded, slowly. That's rare. X shrugged. But it shouldn't be. By then, Elon had taken a seat too. He didn't say much. He just watched them, the man and the boy, speaking as if fame didn't exist. As if power had stepped out of the room for a moment and left something truer behind. He'd never seen Trump like that. Not when cameras were rolling. Not even behind closed doors in private sessions. Something about the boy, his quiet stature, his unwavering presence, had disarmed him. And in that silence, something unusual happened. Trump let his guard down. The layers of performance, the instinct to posture, to shield gone. All that remained was the man. Do you know what I thought being president meant when I was your age? Trump asked. X shook his head. Trump chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. A big desk, a big plane, big words. That's what I thought it was. And I got all of that, but none of it helped me sleep. X's eyes widened. You couldn't sleep? Trump looked away for a brief moment, the memory touching him somewhere deep. Most nights? No, because I was scared I'd forget someone. X's brow furrowed. Someone small, Trump continued. Someone who couldn't afford to wait. Someone who never got their letter read, or their call returned. He exhaled through his nose, quiet and sharp. I used to lie awake thinking, what if the person who needed me most never got through? The boy was still, processing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, that's why I want to do it. Trump blinked. If I were president, X said, I'd pick one person every day. Just one. Someone nobody else wanted to talk to. And I'd talk to them. He looked at his father, then back at Trump. Is that dumb? Trump didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He nodded slow. Certain. That's smarter than what I did. By the time their conversation wound to a close, the room had dimmed. The chandelier above cast a soft amber glow now, as if aware of the weight in the air. Even the White House itself, a place of noise and power, seemed to quiet in respect. Trump stood, stretched his back with a gentle groan, then looked at the boy once more. You already have something most people never find. X tilted his head. A reason, Trump said. Then, with a quiet rustle, he reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small, folded card. Blank on one side, scribbled on the other. He handed it to X. What is it? The boy asked. Trump gave a tired smile, maybe even a wink. It's what I wrote to myself the night before I won. Elon leaned in slightly. Curious. X opened the card slowly, as if it might break in his hands. Then he read aloud, barely louder than breath. Don't mistake applause for trust. Don't mistake fear for respect. And don't forget the ones who looked you in the eye when you were still just a man. The room went silent. No response was needed. X folded the card back up, carefully, as if it were made of glass. Trump placed a hand on his shoulder. Brief, firm, real. And then he turned and walked away. No handshake, no closing line, just footsteps down the hallway and the sound of a door closing behind him. Elon and X walked back to their suite in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the moment was still too large for words. Near the guest quarters, X tugged lightly at his father's sleeve. Do you think he meant it? He asked. Elon crouched down, looking him in the eye. Yes, he said. I think he meant it more than anyone has in a very long time. X glanced down at the card in his hand. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, I'm going to remember the part about trust. Elon hugged him, tighter than usual, not because of the paper in his hand, but because of what had just been placed inside his chest. Something heavy, something sacred, and something the boy carried now, not with fear, but with resolve. That night, in the stillness of the White House, only two things remained. An old man's words, a young boy who believed them. The next morning began not with alarms or official briefings, but with quiet. X sat at the window ledge in their suite, knees tucked up to his chest, watching as the Washington sky faded from gray to gold. He'd been awake before dawn, not from a nightmare. Something else had stirred him, a kind of energy, not in his ears, but in his chest. He couldn't explain all the things Trump had said, but he remembered the look in his eyes. There was something strong in that man, but also something lonely. And even though X didn't have the words yet, he recognized it, because sometimes, even in full rooms, even with his father near, he felt that too. In the hallway, Elon paced slowly with a porcelain mug in hand. There were meetings ahead, calls to return, plans to finish. But something about this morning made everything else feel very, very small. He paused outside his son's door, knuckles hovering over the wood. Then a soft knock. You awake? A quiet voice answered from inside. Yeah. Elon eased the door open. The boy sat cross-legged on the wide window bench, chin balanced in his palm, gazing out into the soft morning haze. "Did you sleep at all?" Elon asked. X shrugged gently. "A little, but my brain wouldn't stop thinking." Elon gave a faint smile, then stepped into the room. "Want to tell me what about?" X didn't turn right away. His eyes stayed with the sky. "Why I asked what I asked last night." Elon waited. "I didn't plan to say it," X said. "It just felt like I had to." "And what made you ask him?" Elon asked softly. "He felt big," the boy said simply. "Like people are always looking at him. But I wondered if anyone ever asked how he got that big, or if it made him feel alone." Elon sat beside him, resting his mug on the window ledge. A thin wisp of steam curled up between them, dissolving into the quiet. "I think," Elon said, "he gets asked a lot of things. But maybe not that." They sat like that for a while, not speaking, just watching the sky shift from silver to pale gold. Then X said something that caught Elon by surprise. "Daddy, I think I meant it." Elon looked over quietly. "Meant what?" "What I said. About being president." Elon studied his son's face. Clear, steady, too young, and somehow not. "That's a big thing to mean," he said gently. "I know," X replied. "But last night didn't make me afraid of it. It made me want to grow into it." Elon nodded slowly. "And if you did, what would you do first?" The boy hesitated, thinking. "Then, I'd listen. To people who don't usually get invited." Elon felt something tighten in his chest. Just a little. A breath he hadn't noticed he was holding. "Like who?" he asked. X's voice dropped. "Like kids who sleep in cars. Or the people who clean the buildings but never get to sit inside them." Elon drew a deep, steady breath. "You're thinking about the woman by the train station, aren't you?" X nodded. "She asked for water. No one stopped, but she looked like someone's mom." Elon's voice softened. "She probably is. I think she deserves a seat," X said quietly. Elon reached an arm around him. Not to console, not for comfort, but to anchor himself against the swell rising in his chest. His son wasn't just making a statement. He was stepping into something. A sense of purpose, a burden willingly picked up, and that both moved him and scared him, more than he could say. Later that morning, a small envelope was slipped under their door. No postage, just the presidential seal, written in careful, slanted pen. "To X from DT." X opened it with care. Inside was a single note card. On it, handwritten, "You asked the right question. You made the room stop. That's leadership. Keep your reason. Never trade it for applause." There was no signature, only a small sketch at the bottom, rough but clear. A hand holding a candle. That afternoon, as long shadows stretched across the south lawn, Trump invited Elon for a walk. No cameras, no aides, just the two of them. Secret Service hung back. They walked the manicured path in near silence until Trump spoke. "He's not like other kids." Elon didn't argue. "I know. I don't mean it in a bad way," Trump continued. "I mean, he's not distracted." Elon smiled faintly. "No, he's not." Trump kept his eyes ahead. "When I was his age, all I wanted was to build the tallest tower. Make the other kids jealous. Be the one everyone looked at." Elon glanced sideways. "And now?" Trump slowed his steps. "Now, I wish I'd asked more questions, like the ones he did." There was a pause. Then Trump added quietly, "People look at him because he doesn't need them to." Elon nodded. "He's looking for something else." Trump stopped walking. "You're going to have to protect that." "I know." From the cameras, from the noise, from ambition. Elon answered again, softer this time. "I know." Trump looked back toward the residence, then said, "That's the kind of boy who becomes something we forgot we could be." That night, for the very first time, X wrote something down. It wasn't long, just a single sentence. He folded the paper, tucked it beneath his pillow like a secret only the morning was allowed to discover. "If I ever forget who I said I wanted to help, then I shouldn't do it." And right there, beneath the roof of the world's most powerful building, a boy began carrying something stronger than fire. He carried conviction, and it glowed. By morning, the headlines had arrived. It started with one grainy photo, snapped from outside the Roosevelt Room. A faint image, slightly blurred, of Donald Trump kneeling beside a small boy, their heads nearly touching. No podium, No press. Just two figures. One shaped by decades, the other just beginning. Within hours, the internet ignited. Who was the boy that made Trump listen? Inside the White House, moment that silenced the room. Elon Musk's son, and the question that changed everything. The press didn't have the whole story, but that had never stopped them before. By afternoon, they were camped outside the gates. Mr. Musk, did your son declare a presidential run? Is this a campaign stunt? President Trump, will you endorse him in 2048? Neither Trump nor Elon answered. But X noticed. That evening, back at Elon's private residence, the boy sat on the floor, legs folded, head down. In his hands was the card Trump had given him. Elon paused in the doorway, watching for a moment before stepping inside. They're saying things, X muttered. I know, Elon said gently. They're making jokes. I know you didn't say it to be famous. X looked up. Then why do they want to turn it into something else? Elon sat down beside him. Because they're not used to small things changing big rooms. So they make it louder. Messier, easier to understand. X was quiet. Still. But Elon added, what you said, it wasn't small. Not really. The boy stared at the card again. Is it bad that I still want it? Elon met his eyes. No, it's good. That's how you know it's real. Meanwhile, across town, Trump was doing something he rarely did. He was alone. No staff. No scripts. No noise. Just him. In a single, leather-bound notebook. His initials, DJT, were etched into the bottom corner. He opened it, flipped past pages of campaign notes, stray thoughts, half-written speeches, then stopped on a clean page and wrote one line. The room went still, not because I had power, but because for once I wasn't trying to use it. He closed the notebook and sat back. For the first time in years, he felt something unusual. He didn't want to be quoted. He just wanted to be understood. The next morning, Trump sent out one message. Not to the media, not to Congress, not to his team. It came sealed, hand-delivered to Elon. Inside, a handwritten note. Don't let them turn it into noise. The boy asked something holy, and I answered. That's all this was. No signature, just the same small sketch. A hand holding a candle. Elon folded the note and tucked it into his pocket. He said nothing. That evening, after the frenzy had crested and burned itself out, X came to Elon with a quiet spark in his eyes. I want to do something, he said. Elon looked up from the book he was reading. What kind of something? I want to write a letter. To other kids. Elon lowered the book. What would it say? X thought for a while. Really thought. Then answered that you don't have to wait until you're big to care about big things. The next morning, the letter appeared, taped gently to the outside of X's bedroom door. It wasn't for cameras, not for headlines, not for the world, just for the people inside the house. In careful, clumsy handwriting, it read, if you're small and you feel big things, that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're paying attention. Keep going. And underneath, in parentheses, I still want to be president. But now I know why. And in the quiet that followed the storm, something beautiful stayed behind. Not a campaign, not a quote, not a movement, just a whisper that refused to be drowned. The world moved on quickly as it always did. The headlines shifted, the hashtags faded, scandals replaced silence, outrage replaced awe. But some moments don't vanish with a news cycle. They echo. For those who had been in the Roosevelt room that night, the night a small boy said he wanted to be president, the stillness remained. Because it hadn't been about politics. It hadn't been theater. It had been something harder to name, something closer to sacred. Weeks later, back in Texas, the world felt quieter. Elon watched from the porch as his son sat in the tall grass, a notebook resting on his lap, a pencil moving slowly across the page. It was late afternoon, and the sky was turning the color of softened flame. Still thinking about it? Elon asked, stepping down with a bottle of water in hand. X didn't look up. I don't think I ever stopped. Elon handed him the bottle and sat beside him, his elbows resting on his knees. Are you thinking about what people said? X shook his head. I'm thinking about what I said. If I'm in it. Elon was quiet. Then, and did you? The boy nodded barely. I did, he whispered, but I didn't know how big it was. Not until I saw how scared some people looked. He paused. They laughed, or made it a joke, because when something little feels real, it makes grown-ups nervous. Elon exhaled slowly. His son wasn't wrong. He glanced at the notebook. "Can I see what you're drawing?" X turned the page so Elon could look. It wasn't a rocket. It wasn't the White House. It wasn't even a speech. It was a circle of kids, all sitting together. One had their hand raised. The others were listening. And in the center of the circle was something simple. A small torch balanced between them. The flame was tiny, but steady. "They're all presidents," X said. "Not the kind with suits. The kind that know when to stop talking." Back in Washington, Trump had kept the boy's letter. He didn't frame it. He didn't post it online. He didn't even tell his advisors he had it. He kept it tucked inside his jacket pocket, folded carefully like something fragile. To most, it looked like a schedule or a speech note. They never asked. But sometimes, when he was alone in a hallway, or sitting in the back of a motorcade, he'd unfold it and read that last line. "I still want to be president, but now I know why." And each time, something inside him softened. Because after all the crowds that had chanted his name, after all the signs, the noise, the winds, only one person had ever made him feel accountable. Not to the vote, to his own soul. A month later, an envelope arrived at Elon's home. No return address, just a single photograph inside. Black and white, a still frame from the Roosevelt room that night. Trump kneeling, X standing, hand behind his back, listening. On the back of the photo, scrawled in ink, he reminded me what I forgot. Protect that. And beneath it, in smaller handwriting, don't let the world teach him to shout. Years would pass. The world would forget the story. It would move on to louder things. Flashier names, hotter headlines. But in one house in Texas, a drawing remained pinned to the wall. A circle of children, a raised hand, a flame that hadn't gone out. And beneath it, written in X's own hand, "Power isn't the light, it's the hand that carries it." And one day, if that boy ever raised his hand again in a room that mattered, the world would stop. Not because of his last name, but because of his reason. If this touched something in you, share it and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the smallest voice carries the brightest flame.